Hello humans and assorted species. Asalama meda vera malo, ura malo maone. So, if you could tell either from the title, thumbnail, or that section in Velithian, today's video is going to be about my world building project, Echoes of Velithia. This video is going to be about the geography and cultures of the main planet Binitu. Let's begin! Binitu is a terrestrial planet with an atmosphere of oxygen. For most intents and purposes, it is just like Earth. Binitu does, however, not naturally have a moon. But the moon in the room with us right now is manually constructed. We'll talk about it later. Binitu has a much smaller axial tilt compared to Earth. This means that while it still has seasons, the seasonal variation is much less. For example, the poles are much warmer during the year than they would be on Earth. The Snohari year is divided into 360 days, with 4 90-day seasons, beginning in planting, which will align with spring, then growth, harvest, and plenty, which will align with what we know as summer, autumn, and winter. Each season is divided into 2 45-day weathers, a warm and a cool weather. Each weather is divided into 9 cycle sets, which are each 5 days. Usually there's a festival to celebrate the main event of each season. These festivals are intricately tied to Snohari reproductive system, so I'll cover this part of their culture in that video. Now, the continents and major islands. Here at the equator, the 2 major continents are Auraria on the west side and Desria on the east. These make up the majority of Benitu's landmass and contain a whole variety of climates and regions. Main to note is the inland ocean that divides the 2 major continents. It is also the distinction between the southern and northern parts of the ocean. Pla is the northern part and Amal is the south part. Even though they are technically the same body of water, they have opposing current systems. The inland ocean is divided in 2, with the west side being Eptos and the east side being Elos. On the far west of Auraria is a large island that stretches across the equator called Loriash. The poles of the planet each have landmasses. The north pole is Azura, and the south pole is Fanwe. Between the 2 poles, on the opposite side of the planet to the central continent, there is an archipelago known as the Asbaraway Plarai, which stretches from south to north. Now, despite the sheer amount of space that is available on Binitu, in total only an area of about Fanwe or Asura is actually inhabited, and most areas outside of the inhabited areas aren't even touched. How is this? Well, let me introduce world speaking, the magic system on Binitu, which will definitely need its own video or 2. Anyway, what's important is a tribe led by an individual known as the Rani discovered a book. This book was not from Binitu and was written in English and Velithian. Velithian is the native language of Lorani's tribe. And it taught them how to world speak, a form of observation-controlled manipulation of quantum states. This soon led to the ability to teleport between locations with ease. So, in a very short time, the whole entirety of Desria, Auraria, and Aloriash were completely within walking distance of everyone. This basically flattened all cultural differentiation that could have taken place on the Snohari, since all the cities of Binitu were practically now one large city divided by a few gates. Small towns became more like districts. Keep in mind, while Lorani's tribe did bring an era of incredible peace in both severity and length, or at least so far has been documented of the era, the way that this was achieved is quite the opposite of peaceful. Lorani and their tribe used the discovery of world speaking to annihilate or assimilate every other culture of Snohari across Desria, Auraria, and the Loriash. The only surviving continents were Azura and Fanwe, and for good reason, as they had already discovered simple forms of word speaking on their own. Maybe not in forms as complex as taught in the Book of All Languages, but powerful enough. Even if not violently taken over, Azura and Fanwe, despite also being made of a mosaic of cultures, have over time become more uniform, and what used to be completely different cultures has collapsed more into the difference between Britain and Australia, for example. Now, a very short tangent. I'm going to explain this much more in its own video, but in Desria there's a desert of Östersund, which has a very powerful society not conquered by Lorani. But it has itself so strongly divided from the rest of Binitu that it's not really involved in the rest of geopolitics. Up until recent modern history on Binitu, there has been a thriving trade of seafaring between Azura and Farway across the Asbaraway Plarai. Due to the universal Savari aversion to using wooden materials, these ships would often be made of fibers or cotton, woven incredibly tight using world-speaking. Originally simply for trade, this practice became instead integral to the world-speaker pilgrimage to Azura. Now, in general, the cultures of Azura believe that all objects have souls, and that treating nature, land, and tools well will do one well in the future. Consequently, people of Azura try not to build over nature too much, but living in as polar a climate as Binitu offers, it is hard not to build houses. But Azuran architecture is to be admired, because it does the best it can within the smallest boundaries possible. Then, of course, at Magnetic North, there is a forge of sorts for creating Asarna crystals, also known as condensed reality crystals, a crystal stone that is practically indestructible and enhances world speaking. They do, however, dissolve over time. Finally, the Azuran belief of objects having souls is congruent with the modern belief of world speaking that the perception of reality and meaning that is put onto objects by people affects the way they behave. It is theorized that being closer to the magnetic north meant the presence of Verilith was stronger in Azura, and so the people were more in touch with the universe. Meanwhile, in Fanway, the culture there is one of a shared mind, also congruent with the modern theories of the Verilith, but I digress. And so there was and is a very strong mindset of helping all without requirement of payment, since all people are just pieces of one larger entity. This belief and a few other factors made in ancient days that Fanway was one of the strongest cultures, having strong metallurgy and the buddings of a strong society. Fanway is also the most unmarred by Lorani conquest, both due to their societal strength and that the South Magnetic Pole is harder to attune, though technically more potent. In modern day, Fanway does most in its power to be a source of international aid, but mostly keeps to itself. Laranism is the religion paired usually with the Lorani culture, as well as the normal Samvari sanctity for trees and plants. Laranism uses world speaking as the center of its belief, integrating into all corners of life and finding ways to keep its power under control. In general, Laranism believes in creating and doing things that go against natural entropy. Finally, Orderism developed in the near-modern era as an alternative to Laranism, where everyone gets their own purpose, known as a pursuit. I think I've explained a decent amount of Orderism in my previous world-building video, but order of society has inherent stratification and hierarchy within it. Though in the very modern era, Orderism went a little bit violent when they invented an improved form of world-speaking known as the Philithian arts, then declared it as the only true and safe form, and began to wipe out all Laranists who practice world-speaking. A refresher on the Orderist system. There's the pursuits, and then above the other pursuits are the pursuits of abstract and order, which usually go together, as abstract is a little euphemism for the Philithian arts. The 12 permanent, who, if you want a little bit more info, I will make a video on just them. I named them all in my previous video on world building. Anyway, above them is the Order, who is second in command just below the Liberator. And now, the moon in the room with us. As part of their conquest, the Orderist leader began the building of an orbital moon that could support life of Orderists inside. This Asai, which translates to perfection in Velithian, became the main staging area for the war and an excuse for Orderism to hunt Laranis with extra ferocity. Oh, something that I forgot to mention is that with the discovery of the Book of Old Languages, world speakers would learn to speak English as part of world speaking, and it low-key became more common to speak English than their native language Velithian. However, during the Liberation Law, the Liberator, the Orderist leader, decreed that English would be restricted to only be spoken by high priests of order, and this was actually a positive development, in a way, because it revived the native language of the culture. And to finish, Samvari burials. Specifically in Laranism, there is a strong belief in the cycle of energy, and the world speaking is used to transform the bodies of dead Samvari into energy that is instantly transferred to the surroundings, allowing flowers and plants to grow as if time had sped up. Now, if a world speaker dies very suddenly, for example by murder, their body does a similar thing, but instead, all their world speaking energy exits them in a huge explosion. Pro tip, don't kill world speakers unless absolutely necessary. Thanks for watching. Hopefully the next video of this series, which focuses on the currencies of each society, will be even more interesting.